Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to be answering some questions that have come in this week all about a domain name. So all about your website, how to choose a domain name, what to do if the domain name that you want has already been taken, and also we're going to be digging in a little bit into LinkedIn and how you can use the LinkedIn platform for search engine optimization for better visibility both within the LinkedIn platform itself and also to help increase your visibility to your own website or your own brand outside of the LinkedIn profile. So if we don't know each other yet, I'm Marjorie Stiegler. I'm a physician like you and also a healthcare social media expert. So I am here to, on this page, always deliver you guys content around social media and online strategies for physicians. So if that interests you, please go ahead and like, follow, and turn on your notifications, because that way you'll find out when there's something new here. I don't put anything else on this page, so you won't be getting any information about what I'm having for lunch. There's only content around social media strategy for healthcare leaders. So let me get right into some of the questions that have come in. So the first question that has really been kind of blowing up, I think this week in particular in some of the circles that I'm in on Facebook, is about domain names. Now, a lot of people have been asking about domain names, and even at my recent conference, the Transformed Conference this past January in Mexico, many of our attendees had said, I've been thinking about starting a website, but I haven't done it yet. What should my URL be? What should my domain name be? What should I call myself? And this is a really popular question because people feel compelled to sort of choose between something that's very clever and something that is very, just very much their name, which a lot of people feel like is too boring. Now, in full disclosure, that's how I named my website. It's marjoriestieglermd.com. It's not short, and it may not be that easy to spell, which I'm about to get into some strategies here in a second, but it's my name, it's my title, and the purpose of my website is just really all about my professional brand. So it's good for that reason. I think the days are pretty much gone for folks who want to have really short ones, that like Dr. Oz can be Dr. Oz and Kevin MD can be Kevin MD, but for most of us it's not going to fly anymore because it depends really on the brand that you're building. So let me get into let me get into first, I think, the things that are most important when you're choosing a domain name, and then I'll tell you kind of how they branch off and what's different. So the first and foremost, your domain name needs to be readable. So make sure that when you take away all the caps and any spaces and any punctuation and anything like that around your name or around your company's name or whatever it is that you want to choose for your URL, that it reads in a way that makes sense, and that it doesn't start to look like other words. That's one of the reasons why, if you are a physician with an MD degree and you want to include that in your name, I recommend putting it at the end. If you are a physician with a DO degree, I recommend putting at the beginning just doctor, because if you put DO at the end, it just reads like do. And so people get confused. They may not understand it. It's just not quite as visibly clear, perhaps, as the MD degree. So fortunate or unfortunate, I would recommend that, because it has to be readable, without caps, without punctuation, without spaces. You also have to think about what it sounds like, because when people are telling other people, or when you are telling other people about your website, you've got to make sure that it sounds, the way that it's spelled. Now, your name is your name, and there's nothing you can do about that. So if your name has an unusual pronunciation or is tricky for everyone to pronounce, there's nothing that I would really expect you to do about that right now. But if you are choosing a brand name, make sure that it is something that sounds good when you're reading it the way that it's in the domain name. Similarly, you want to be sure that it's memorable. Now, again, if it's your name, then your name is your name, and most people are searching for you by name. They already know you exist. So if you're setting up your blog for professional reasons, whereby you want to make sure that when someone searches for your name, they find this set of information that you're setting up, you don't need to worry about this as much, because the person already knows you exist. They're already searching for you by your name. So that's easy. If you are setting up your website for the purpose of a different brand, maybe it's some kind of a side business or an entrepreneurial thing that's going on for you, or you simply would like to name it after a topic, right, your subject area of expertise, then you want to be careful about all of these things, the readability, the sound, and the memorableness, so that a person can come back and find you later. If you are going to be doing something outside of just your name, make sure that it gives some kind of semblance, some sort of hint about what kind of industry it is, right? Make sure that if you have something that is just, a name that's a word or some kind of catchy phrase, that it's at least hints towards either being medical, if that's your thing, or whatever your thing is. For those of you who are listening or watching, I hope you'll type in questions if that didn't make sense. But you want to be sure that the industry is sort of clear from the website. And the reason for that, again, is the memorableness and the searchability, right? Because here's where I'm really going to kind of divert. If you are setting up your website for your professional brand name, for your professional self, then your website is your name. And there's a variety of permutations you can choose, but your website more than likely ought to be your name. And if it is your name, you can worry about all these things much less, because it is searchable by just the nature of the fact that it's your name. People will be typing in your name. If you're setting up your website to be a representative of some kind of a brand, of a community, of a product, or of a service, then you want to really be sure that you are searchable. And so one of the things that's really popular these days is naming brands minus some of the vowels. And this can be great. I mean, there must be some reason that the companies are doing it, but you might remember some number of years ago when the company Flickr, which is spelled just with an R instead of ER at the end, ended up having to shell out a bunch of money to buy Flickr with the ER domain from the person who owned it in order to get their traffic, because the customers, the people who were searching, didn't know. They were getting it wrong. And so if you have something that you think is very clever, just be aware that the more clever you are, the more you potentially interfere with the search results. Okay, so that's really important. Then I would mention the top-line domain. The top-line domain, I think, is really, really important. And again, this comes into play with the cleverness factor. If you don't know what a TLD or a top-line domain is, it is what comes after the domain. So the .com, .gov, .live, .co. So you're familiar with these because you type them in all the time. This is called the top-line domain, or the TLD. Nowadays, there are many. You can get a lot of vanity TLDs. So you can get .coffee. You can get all kinds of stuff. I really, really recommend you think very carefully before you choose a website that has something like that. It is clever and it may be very memorable, but it is also probably difficult for people to search. You're going to find a lot of traffic that is going to be going to, your domain name .com instead of .coffee or .live film or whatever it is that you've chosen. So I strongly recommend that you go with .com. If you are searching for a name and someone else has already taken the .com, then I give very, very serious thought to whether or not you want to don't take .net, don't do that. .org is maybe okay if you are indeed a company. .gov obviously is okay for the government, but I really would strongly recommend that you give some serious pause. If your company's name has already been taken by somebody else, .com, you don't want to fight that traffic. That's not a winning strategy at all. You're going to want to rethink your name, in my opinion. If you have your professional brand as your name and you are unfortunate you're in the unfortunate situation where somebody has already claimed your domain name, either because they have a very similar name or for some other legitimate business purpose, then over on my website, on my blog, I have a long list of potential other formats. So I mentioned that I think, first name, last name, md.com, or doctor, first name, last name, if you have a DO, is the way to go. But there are some other permutations, including your initials and spelling out certain things, possibly adding your specialty or your geography, only if it's short, right? Again, memorableness and being able to type it. So over on my blog, I do have a post. I'll put the link here. I wonder if I can put it right now. Yeah. So you can click on this link and you can pop on over there and see my list of suggestions for what you can do if your professional brand name, your name is already taken. Now, a lot of people are surprised to know that trademark, copyright, and domain name are really not interlinked very tightly at all. So anytime you write anything down, it's essentially protected by copyright unless you've given that copyright to somebody else. In order to have a trademark, a brand trademark, you don't actually have to register it. And again, I'm not an attorney, but you don't have to register with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office if you're using it in commerce, and you can establish that you have, right, your first day of use in commerce. You more likely would like to get a registered trademark, and you're going to have a hard time growing your brand if your brand name has been trademarked by somebody else, especially if it's in an overlapping area of goods and services. But if it's completely different, I mean, if you're an apple orchard that sells apples, you're not going to have a problem with Apple Computer, right? That's just not going to be a problem. But if you are in the tech industry in some way, then you will. So in any case, you may have a trademark, you may have copyright, you may already have all kinds of sort of brand presence, but that doesn't give you any right to your domain. And that is something that people often find out the hard way and way too late. So you don't have a right to your domain name. Under very few circumstances can you make the case that someone has taken your domain name, even if it is your name. Now, having said that, there's been some talk lately about cybersquatting. So this is when a person buys up a domain name for the specific intent of either preventing you from using it or profiting themselves from the goodwill that is already in existence around your name. This is against the law. It's against federal law. The law was passed in 1999, and it is illegal to do that. The trouble, of course, with anything illegal is that in order to get recourse, you have to hire an attorney and you have to go through a legal process in order to get satisfaction and resolution there. But just be aware that, if that is the case, that whoever it is that has the domain name that you wanted really has no legitimate business purpose with that domain name, then you may have a complaint that could be resolved legally unless you want to choose one of the other options that I've listed on my blog. You should know that there are legitimate reasons that someone might take your domain name, and not all of them are really maybe ethical, but still legal. So for example, you could take somebody's domain name in order to write a bunch of reviews about that company. So if the company had not established a domain name yet, you might have that domain name and the sole purpose would be to have a review repository. That may be legal, it's probably not ethical, it's not very cool. The other thing is, if you're looking for your domain name, and you can look, by the way, at GoDaddy, at Bluehost, at a variety of places. I do have an embedded searcher in my blog post there as well. When you're looking for a domain name, if it's already taken, there will be some information. There's public information about who owns it and a way to contact them. Now, if they have created a website with your domain name, then clearly you will see a website. And it's also the law that the website gives some contact information. So you should be able to be in touch with whomever it is that has your intended website if you want to pursue that. If they're just sort of squatting on it, right, and they haven't made a website, you'll still be able to find out by searching the URL who it is that's purchased it. And then very often it's through a third-party proxy, but you can still be in contact with them to ask them if it is available for sale, what's their intention with it, are they planning a website? So you may be able to get it back, you may be able to buy it, and again, if it's been taken under sort of in something that would fall within the federal protection of the Anti-Cybersquatting Act, then you may have legal recourse, but again, you'll have to get an attorney, and that's a hassle. I do want to say, as long as we're on this topic, that a couple of people, several folks this week, have been looking for their domain names because of this conversation, and they have found that it appears that Doximity.com has their domain name. So I reached out to Doximity to ask that question. Physician colleagues of mine find their URL, their equivalent of marjoriestiegler.com, and when they put it in, it's already taken, and it's taken by, apparently, the Doximity company. If this is you, if this has happened to you, Doximity assures me that this is a service that they intended as a benefit for members that you have opted into and that you can opt right back out of. That's what they told me. So you can simply email them at support@doximity.com and say you just like to reclaim ownership of your domain name. And then in doing so, they'll transfer it to you, which involves just a little bit of tech knowledge, not very much at all. But then, of course, you'll have to take over paying for it. So domain names are usually not very much, maybe about $12 or $15 to establish, and usually have to be renewed each year. They have apparently been paying for them. So if you are among these people who type in your name and you find a website that appears to be run by Doximity, just be assured that they have said anyway to me that that is a service they provided as a courtesy, and that they're happy to give it right back to anybody who emails them. So just for clarity on that specific issue, as long as you're going to be searching. Having said that, I really recommend very, very strongly that you go in right now and you search for whatever would be your ideal domain name. If you have a business in mind, if you have your professional brand in mind, you should lock that in. It is not expensive to do, but when it's taken, it's gone. It's gone. And when it's gone, it can be very expensive or impossible to get back. And so even if you don't have immediate plans for a website, you probably have 12 bucks or 15 bucks or however much it is. So I would really recommend that you invest that money and lock it in. You can think about it for a year. You can think about it for 4 years. You never need to do anything with it because you can't be cyber squatting on your own name. So go ahead and look for your name now and lock it in, because far too many people have been emailing me lately saying, you know, I just finally got up the courage. I'm ready to launch my own website, and it's already taken. When it's taken, it's taken. If you have the same name as somebody else and they have the website now, you're going to constantly be in a battle for search engine results against that person. So it's always better to be first. It's always better to be first. Get the domain name. And it's always better to have the .com, right? Because that is just what people are going to type in more frequently. So get the domain name. Okay, I think that's all that I had written down for the questions that have come in around domain names. So again, without caps, without punctuation, make sure it's readable. It sounds okay. It doesn't sound like something, you know, different in a different industry than it is. It doesn't sound like two different words that are sort of blended together. That part is clear, that it's memorable, and that of course if it's your name, it's your name. And unless you are a celebrity, I really don't recommend doing the whole, like, you know, I wouldn't go like drmarjorie.com. I don't recommend doing that. It's less effective for your search engine optimization. And although it might be easier and shorter, I don't think it really confers you a lot of benefit, but it does come with it some risk of fewer people finding you. So for search engine optimization alone, I wouldn't do anything like that, unless you're doing it in conjunction with another website that you have with your full name, right? In which case you can link the two back and forth and it becomes fine. But you don't want to be, you know, drjill.com, because nobody is searching for drjill.com. They're searching for Dr. Jill somebody else, right, .com. And so again, unless you're Dr. Oz or you're Kevin MD, that's probably just not going to work out for you at this stage. It's too late. Okay, I'm going to shift gears now and go into LinkedIn here. So the question is, how do I use LinkedIn for search engine optimization and to sort of build my brand presence? So there's a handful of things you can do on LinkedIn that you should be aware of. The first is that the LinkedIn headline should be really, really good. The headline is your bio. It's the top line of the bio. So it's it's just 1 or 2 sentences at most. And it's what gets displayed next to your picture when you leave a comment. So when you leave a comment on LinkedIn, it shows your little face, right? The professional headshot that I hope you've uploaded shows that, and it shows the first half or so of your headline. The headline should be very clear and compelling for what it is that you want to have be known about your brand language. So your name is already there, so you don't need to repeat that. You likely don't need to bother to say that you're a physician unless you really want to. You could potentially put in your specialty, but that part, your name is already there, so don't repeat that. Use that space to say something about yourself that you would want, you know, to catch the right people's attention. And whether that be something around, you know, the type of medicine that you practice, or around the entrepreneurial side business that you have going on, or about the fact that you're an author or that you are a speaker or whatever it is that you do, you want that to be sort of right there at the front. And you want to list the topics, right? If you have an area of expertise for which you are well known, that you speak, that you write, or for which you just want to establish that expertise, put those keywords right there in the front of your headline. Do not put in a bunch of cleverness that nobody knows what it means, right? So don't use words that people don't search. And by that, I mean, say you're an expert. Don't say you're a guru, right? Don't say you're, a mastermind or whatever, because people don't search for that. They search patient safety expert. They don't search patient safety guru, right? So you want to be sure that your keywords in your headline match what people will be searching. And you want to make sure that it's understandable when people see that first half of it next to the comments and other ways in which you're engaging on LinkedIn. So don't be too clever. On the other hand, make sure that you're using words that are descriptive, right? That will tell people enough about you that they may be interested enough to kind of come and click over. So just don't get too creative about how you describe what you offer. Just be very clear about your area of expertise and what you want to be known for, what you want to do. So the headline's really important. The headshot is really important. Please don't skip that part. Don't have it be something where someone else is cropped out. And then speaking of photos, so since we're talking about search engine optimization, this is true anywhere and everywhere, on your website, on any social media posts. Whenever you are uploading photos, which of course enjoy a higher rank than text posts, just like video enjoys a higher rank usually than photos, whenever you are doing that, you've got to include you have to change the file name of your picture first, okay? Because when you take a picture, what gets saved to your computer is, image 4,753, and maybe the date. You want to change that to your name or to your brand name or to a product, right? So I would want to change that, Marjorie Stiegler, MD, and perhaps the year or headshot or something like that. You change the name of the image, because when it gets loaded up, that becomes part of what is searchable by the search engines through what's called the alt text, right? This is how Google and other search engines know what the picture is of, because they can't see it yet. Although with AI evolving rapidly, maybe soon they will. But since they don't know what the picture is, they rely on things called the alt text, the description, the metadata to tell them what it is. And so you want your file name, which is part of that metadata, to say something informative about you, about who you are. That will help you be more easily found, assuming that your settings are public. That's where it's searchable. If you've ever wondered, when you click on your name in Google and then you go to images and all these sort of random images pop up, and you didn't put them all up there, where are they coming from? That's because on various social media platforms and probably in news organizations, if anyone's ever even written a little newsletter blurb about you and stuff like that, things get uploaded with deliberate attention to the metadata. That's where it comes from. So you can add to that and influence that on your own by making sure that all the photos you upload on your website and on any of your social media platforms, including LinkedIn, have an appropriate file name, because then even if you can't control the alt text directly, you influence it by having a file name that is searchable that will come back to you. Okay, then what about, someone was asking the difference between articles and posts. So posts are sort of those shorter updates, and they they go right there on your timeline. They're usually sent out to other people who are following you, right, to your colleagues. And you can, if you don't know this, just like on Facebook now, you can sort of a la carte the visibility. So you can put up a post and say, this is visible to everybody in the whole wide world. They have an integration with Twitter, so it's visible to everybody plus Twitter, or it's only visible to certain groups. So you have a lot of flexibility there. I bring this up though because your question is about search engine optimization. And if you want to be found, you have to be public. So if you're going to be using anything that you don't want to be public, I would recommend putting on posts and limiting the publicity setting there, and using the articles feature for the things that you do want to be public, making sure that your broad settings make it public. If it's not public, it's not searchable. So you've got to do that. And then articles are a little bit different. Articles are longer, first of all, and it's essentially a self-contained blogging platform. So if you don't have your own website and you don't have your own blog, but you want to write an article, you can do so right there in articles, and you can publish it. And then of course, once it's published, you can share it in groups and in other places, which I'm going to come to here in a second. You can also take other content that does already exist. So if you have already recorded a video, it's up on YouTube, or if you have already created a blog post or an article, you can copy those and syndicate them into LinkedIn, right? It supports pictures, videos, and all kinds of text. So that can be a good way if you want to just repurpose and weave LinkedIn into your search engine optimization strategy. This is important because if you realize, I mean, LinkedIn has a high amount of Google credibility in and of itself. So if tomorrow you don't have a website and you don't have a LinkedIn profile, and you sit down tomorrow and you open up both with the same name, when someone searches for you, LinkedIn is going to come up higher than your brand new website because Google gives more authority to the LinkedIn platform. Now, eventually you may change that balance, but it's important to realize that as long as you want to take advantage of things that have high credibility and high rank in Google for search engine optimization, you're going to want to do it on platforms that already have sort of built in or already established amount of credibility. So make sure your articles, if that's what you're using, make sure your settings are public so that it can be searched both within LinkedIn and off LinkedIn. So your public articles on LinkedIn can show up as a search result on Google. Okay, so you want to make sure you're doing that. I also just strongly recommend that you maintain separate accounts across any and all social media platforms for your personal and your professional self, because there really should be no reason, in my mind, why you would have a post on LinkedIn that you don't want to be visible to everybody. If it's got something in it that's of a sensitive nature that you don't want to be visible to everybody, it doesn't belong on LinkedIn. And it doesn't belong on your personal Facebook page either or anything like that. So I recommend setting all of those professional settings to public, visible, searchable for the purpose of your professional branding and your search engine optimization. And then anything that's making you hesitate, it doesn't belong there. Don't post it. Don't post it. Okay, then let's talk about groups. So groups are a really, really great way to establish credibility, get into new networks, and increase your visibility on LinkedIn. So although it doesn't directly increase your search engine optimization, it increases your professional visibility. So you want to look for groups that have some sort of topic, right, that's related to your area of expertise, where you can be an active contributor. And then you want to go to those groups on a regular basis and see what kind of things people are sharing. You want to provide insightful comments around those topics. And then you'd like to, from time to time, share your own articles or your own things. Now, in this regard, if you're sharing back to your own website, you can build some what's called backlinks, or sort of off-page search engine optimization, which is having a highly engaged group who's going to be very interested in your content, potentially having a way to link back to your website. That's a really great strategy, but you don't want to spend all your time in your group doing that, because people will get very fatigued of you trying to get them over to your website. So spend a lot of time commenting and interacting on other people's content, and when it's appropriate and you have something great to share, definitely share it. So groups, that's the other thing. Plus, you don't have to be following any of the people or connected to any of the people in your groups. So it opens up this entire world of experts in your field, or at least enthusiasts, right, interests in your area, that you don't have to have already known or get an introduction to in order to interact with in the group. It may help you to grow your network because people may want to then become connections of yours, but it opens up a huge, huge world, just like a Facebook group does, where you get to have sort of direct contact with other like-minded professionals that you didn't have to be, introduced to in some way. So LinkedIn groups are really, I think, very, very high value for professional visibility. And then the final thing around, so what about the LinkedIn algorithm? I'll say this, all of social media and all of search engine algorithms are going to be ever changing. So anything I say about it today could be wrong tomorrow, except for one thing, and I'll say it now. Their entire purpose is to serve you the best results, right? The best, whatever they think is the best. So if you put in any kind of search term, the search engine, whether it's Pinterest or Google or Bing or LinkedIn, is going to try to serve you up the article or the source that is of the highest value to you. And they judge that, of course, based on historicals, right? Based on people who came before you with the same search term and what they chose to click on, and then whether or not they chose to leave immediately, or if they chose to stay, read it, then read something else and interact in some other way. And so all of that really increases the value of your website. This is the reason why these artificial groups don't work. So when you get together with 20 random strangers and say, I'm going to like your post, you like my post, that doesn't work because, the search engines can sort of tell the difference, right? They can tell the difference between an artificial pod that's made up for the purpose of sort of inflating the engagement, which is pretend engagement, compared to people who are really interested. And people who are really interested leave long, insightful comments. They come back day after day, right? They have a regular amount of interaction with each other. So in order for you to get the best sort of search engine optimization from whatever you're putting out on LinkedIn, again, remember that it's got to be public and it's got to be searchable, then I would take that content and I would promote it and disseminate it across your other relevant social media channels. And perhaps with other, again, like-minded and true colleagues, right, for whom sharing that content would be something that they would organically, authentically do anyway, that's of interest to their readership. Because if you're doing that and you have sort of an effective group in that way, that will boost your authority and your credibility within the search engine. Because the ultimate result is the search engine will know that your content was of high value because it got engagement, it got comments, it got shared, and the people who got shared with read it and were interested in it, and on we go, right? It can't just be a dead end of a random person liking and a random person sharing. That really doesn't work. So I don't know if they have a certain number of words in the comments or a certain amount of this or that. None of that is really set in stone. They change it all the time. But the thing that they will never change is that they want to have really high quality results to serve up when a person searches. So choose your words carefully, especially if you're doing articles for the purpose of search engine optimization, right? Make sure you have your SEO strategy down so that you know which keywords are being searched by your intended audience, which keywords have the search intent that you want for your intended audience, whether it's navigational, transactional, whether it's informational. Make sure that you have that strategy nailed down, and then use those words deliberately throughout all of your public and searchable posts and through your headline and anything else that a person could find as a result when they are searching for you. And that will help your search engine optimization always, right? For the long game, no matter what happens with the algorithms, you will always kind of be on top of things if you follow that general principle. So I'm going to scroll through here and see if there's any more, other than you guys saying hi to me. Hi. No, I don't see any other questions other than the ones that have already been fed into me on these two topics. So I'll just wait one more minute and then probably bounce out. But if you do have a question about either domain names or about LinkedIn, please go ahead and put it in the comments now so that I can get to it before I sign off. The domain names, I think, is really, really important. Make sure that if you are thinking about changing your website or thinking about starting a website, or you even think that 7 or 8 years from now you want a website, you should consider looking right now for your domain name and locking it down. It is absolutely worthwhile, even if you have no immediate plans for it. And certainly if you have a business that has a trademark and has a branding language, you should lock down that as well if you can. I mean, if it's not already taken, you should absolutely do that. Those are really important things to do. And inexpensive. It's an inexpensive investment. How often to post? No, you are not. Okay, first of all, free. You are not so far behind. Everybody always feels far behind online, because when we look around at each other, we think, gosh, everybody's doing everything. Everybody has a hugely developed presence on every single social media platform that ever was, and their website is so much more developed than mine, and so on. That is not the case. It's just not the case. So you're not behind. Don't worry. And anyone who's been to your website, they'll think they're behind, because I've seen what you've got going on for you, and you've got quite a bit. Nancy, you want to know how often to post for LinkedIn? So I don't know the specific answer to that, but it does kind of come back to the general SEO principles, which is that people like to have, the search engines like to have consistent content. And so just like with a blog, it's sort of recommended that at a minimum, you blog twice a month. If you can, if you want to blog every day, super. If you can blog but once a week, but that things come out on a regular basis. So when I'm thinking about how often you want to post on LinkedIn, I think it's more of a question really of how consistently can you post on LinkedIn. So if you think that you're only going to have maybe 12 pieces, 12 articles or so that are sort of LinkedIn appropriate for whatever that means for you, then I would do it once a month. If you have a robust blog going on right now that has the same set of topics and intended audience as your LinkedIn set, and you're blogging there once a week, by all means, syndicate it on over to LinkedIn once a week. If you have the time and the leisure to look up other related articles and post things that you're interested in from other places, like from the Harvard Business Review or the Lancet or whatever the case may be, then you can do that every single day. I don't really think you can, I don't think you can really overdo it, because a lot of the articles and things like that don't get pushed out as notifications. So I think daily is certainly not overkill. If you had the content, I don't think twice a day would be overkill either. It's not like Twitter, so you don't need to be posting 15 times a day. But the most important thing across all the platforms is consistency. So however much content you think that you have, kind of think it out according to how can I make sure that I always have something that's relatively recent. Because when a person comes over your social media profile, the worst thing is when it looks like you haven't been there in a long time and it's all dusty and rusty. So it's better to have infrequent but regular content than it is to have a big spurt for a little while and then nothing. Is it bad to post the same thing on all the same platforms at the same time? And is there scheduling or automation available for LinkedIn? That's a great question. Well, so I know that my WordPress blog has an automation to post directly to LinkedIn. I don't do that because for me there's slightly a separate audience, but I could. And I know that Hootsuite, which is what I use for my main scheduler, also allows pre-scheduling for LinkedIn. So I'm sure that there are others. So it answers your question there. Is it bad to post the same thing on all the platforms at the same time? I don't think it's a bad thing to post the same thing, but with a few caveats. The first is your intended audience the same everywhere? For a lot of people, LinkedIn, is very professional, and it's sort of oriented towards their next potential job, or being invited to speak, or finding collaborators with whom to do some research or write a book or whatever the case may be. So that might be a different audience than your website's audience. If it is, I would recommend at least modifying the content so that it is an appropriate presentation to the kind of audience you have on LinkedIn. So for example, I wouldn't post this video directly on LinkedIn, I don't think, but I might post it in the context of, hey, part of my professional role is that I'm a social media healthcare expert, and here are some of my tips, right? And so in that context, it might work for LinkedIn. But right now, my audience right now are, healthcare leaders and physicians who want to learn how to do stuff online, right? To do a better job with their online presence. So that's different from the audience that I would like, to ask me to speak on this topic or to hire me as some kind of expert in their organization. So I don't think there's a problem, but you have to optimize it for the platform. So first of all, be sure that the audiences are correct. And if they aren't, massage it a little bit so that it is at least the lead in or the intro is correct, so that people can see your work, but that they understand it in the context of the work, and that this is a piece of work targeted towards XYZ audience, and now you're sharing it for this purpose. The other thing they have to be really careful about with a lot of those automated services where you put up, an Instagram post and it sends it everywhere, like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, is even if your audiences are the same everywhere, the image requirements and the use of hashtags and the character terms are different. So something that looks great on Instagram because it's the right shape, it's the right cropping, and it has a big fat long narrative, and it has 20 hashtags, is going to look ridiculous on Facebook. It's just going to look out of place, and it's going to get chopped off on Twitter. Now you can take the same content and you can repurpose it on all of those platforms, but it takes some tweaking, right? You would want to be sure, for example, that the very first few characters, are exactly what you would want in a tweet, and that you don't have this, and that you have the picture actually there instead of just linking over to your Instagram feed, right, that it uploads directly. And you would want to probably reduce the amount of hashtags for Facebook, just because people just generally don't use it that way. I don't know if there's really a negative, but it looks out of place. And when it looks out of place, I think that looks unprofessional and sloppy. So I would, if it were me, advise you to just not worry about that one platform. If you don't have time for all the platforms, or your audience isn't quite right on one platform, forget that platform and focus on where your intended audience is, where you're going to connect with the people that you want to talk to, and spend some good dedicated time on that platform. And don't worry about taking everything that you have and turning it into a post on every social media platform, and a blog, and a guest blog, and a podcast, and a video, and it's on YouTube. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. All right, guys, that's it for today then, I think. So if there are other questions that come up about these same two topics, what to do in terms of choosing a domain name, please pop over to my blog. And if you don't see the answer there, by all means, you can ask right here. I'll respond to your questions. And same thing if you have questions about LinkedIn, I will be more than happy to answer them. And I'm probably a better resource for you on strategy on LinkedIn rather than specifics, like, if you can look it up on their help pages. So if your question is, how do I adjust my searchability, publicity settings, look that up on LinkedIn. I am a much better resource for you in terms of how to deploy the strategy for your professional brand or your growing business. But if you can look something up that's a specific question like that, you'll get a better answer from LinkedIn than you will from me. Because as these features change all the time, I, of course, can't keep up with every single thing, but I do keep up with the sort of bottom line for everything, which is that those algorithms are always going to basically be based on the same thing. And no matter what, if you're looking for search engine optimization, you have to have your keyword strategy right, and you have to be public, and it has to be searchable. All right, guys, have a great evening. Anyone who's catching the replay, thank you for watching, and please do leave me your questions.